György Madzsar, take it away. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the HYPE webinar for the month of September. So tonight's honored guest is György Madzsar, who is actually the father of a very good friend of mine that I grew up with, and always knew about his engineering capacity at NASA, and always was eager to learn more about it. About a year ago, I attended a similar webinar and thought it was very well done, and thought he would be a great addition to our events that we host here for HYPE. So I'm just going to read a quick bio about György, or George György. György earned his Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering and Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering degrees from the Cleveland State University. Upon graduation, he began his professional career as a research engineer working on advanced propulsion technologies at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA. Throughout his career, Gyrgy took on increasingly challenging assignments such as space shuttle technology development and rocket engine testing, leading to his current position as program manager responsible for NASA's strategic infrastructure. One of his more memorable assignments was managing the agency's microgravity flight services program. This program flew a large jet aircraft modified to withstand repeated parabolic dives, during which the occupants would experience weightless conditions and free float for up to 25 seconds per dive. An American-Hungarian native of Ohio, György currently resides in Washington, D.C. Welcome, György. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mihai. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad that you reached out to me and I have the opportunity to speak with all of you fellow Hungarians. I'm thrilled to be here, and this is my first time doing this type of an event, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect. We can go multiple directions. I have some prepared slides, some of my most favorite NASA pictures, or we can go right into discussion, questions and answers. This is meant to be a dialogue. I'm hoping all of you participate. I'm happy to tell you all, talk all about my how NASA works, what I do at NASA, and the future of space exploration, and so forth. The title of this talk is Rockets, Space Exploration, excuse me, and Politics. And again, we can go into any one of those directions you want. Politics is kind of important because NASA is part of the federal government, and by definition, we are political. We work for the president. NASA is part of the executive branch, meaning we report to the president. Those of you who remember your civics classes from back when, there are three branches to our government. You have the executive branch, which is the White House, the legislative branch, which is the Senate and the Congress, and the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court and the Department of Justice. So we report to the president, and anything that NASA does is done at the explicit direction of the president. So when you hear somebody saying, why is NASA doing this stupid thing or that stupid thing? Well, it's really the president directing us to do those stupid things. So every one of the NASA missions is explicitly blessed by the currently or then sitting president. Of course, every 4 to 8 years, that could change with a new president. With the recent Biden administration, we switched gears. Under the Trump administration, we were very focused on landing on the moon and Mars and whatnot. Today, we are still under the Biden administration, still focused on going to the moon and Mars, but there's a whole lot of concern for the infrastructure within this country and the infrastructure at NASA. So anyway, I don't know how, Mihai, you want to do this. Do you want me to ramble, or do you want to have a conversation? You want me to show pretty pictures, or?
Let me ask you a quick question, and then we
Okay.
can maybe jump into the slides that you prepared. So I guess maybe first off, usually our participants are, younger, college aged, or preparing for college is kind of our target audience. And I guess maybe what made you want to go into the field of engineering, and what drew you to NASA specifically after maybe going through college, completing some classes or whatnot?
You all know that college is not some classes; it's a lot of classes.
It's a lot of classes.
So it's not easy, but it's a very worthwhile endeavor, of course. But for me, that's an easy softball question. I was a young boy in 1969, sitting in front of my grainy TV, watching the moon landing, and of course, it was 11 or 12 or something like that at the time, and of course, Dad says, "Wow, that's for me. That's what I want to do." It was further cemented a couple years later when my father took me out to the Glenn Research, well, now called the Glenn Research Center. Back then it was the Lewis Research Center. It's the NASA installation here in Cleveland, for an open house. And we got to tour through all the test facilities, got to see some rockets and airplanes and whatnot. That was it for me. So that's what I want to do. And it was never any doubts that was where I was going to end up. Took a fair number of years to get there, but I made it in there, and no regrets at all. No regrets at all.
Very cool. I don't know if you want to share out your presentation and maybe run through that. I know you just prepared a few slides. We can jump through that, and I think I have some questions that I was thinking of for during the presentation. So if you want to take it away, and
Okay.
then we'll go through that.
Let me switch my computer here to the slideshow.
Okay.
I normally use Microsoft Teams for these events, so I'm kind of a Zoom novice. But give me a second where I can figure out how this. It tells me that the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh no. Let
Uh-oh.
me see.
Now you've done it.
Yeah, we just made you a co-host literally like 2 seconds ago, so you should be
Okay.
able to do it
Okay.
now. Do you see a screen share on the
Yes,
bottom?
yes. Give me a second here to work this. I'm going to switch over, so I will not be able to see you on the screen. I'll be looking at my presentation. Again, we can go through this as much as you want. I would prefer to just have a dialogue and conversation, but it's up to all of you how you want to do this. Are you seeing a screen?
Not yet.
Let's see. All right, now you should be seeing a screen.
I see it at the top. I think someone may have pinned.
Looks good on my end.
It's good to me.
Are you seeing the screen?
Does everyone see it in the middle?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to switch over to slideshow mode, so I won't be seeing the Zoom interface there. Let's see.
I think it'd be, yeah.
Play from start. Sorry. Okay. We can go through these again. Feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. Again, I would prefer to work this as a dialogue rather than a presentation. But hopefully some of these charts will stimulate some questions and conversation about what NASA is and does, and why I am so passionate about what I do for the agency and for the country. Again, I'm György Madzsar, György Madzsar. I've been at NASA now for 35 years. So pretty much my entire working career. I am a program manager. I manage one of the larger programs within NASA. I'm in the Office of Strategic Infrastructure, so that should kind of give you a hint as to what I do. I'm responsible for ensuring that the NASA institution, the infrastructure, is up and ready and capable to meet the missions that our president assigns to us. Um, for some background information, I manage a budget of approximately, depending on any given year, 500 to $800 million a year. No, I don't get to keep any of it. I send it out to the various NASA centers to make sure that everything is working and up and operational. So that's who I am. Let me see. Why is it not letting me move my chart here? There we go. Oops, one too many. A few facts about NASA. As I mentioned, we are part of the executive branch. We were created in 1958 under the National Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958. We were created primarily to counter, if you will, at that time, the very recent Russian-Soviet launching an astronaut. So the United States fell a little behind the eight ball there, so they created this agency. They took a bunch of national laboratories, combined them under one heading called NASA, and we've been running ever since. To give you an idea of the budget we deal with, in 2020, our budget was $22.6 billion, and that's just the 1 year. I think in 2021, it's a little bit larger than that, probably about 24 billion. And to give you an idea of the context of that budget with respect to the federal budget, we are about 0.5% of the federal budget. So we're a very, very small part of the budget. That is I believe that's the right dollar value we should be at for what we accomplish for the nation. And so there was a time in the past, particularly during the Apollo days, where the NASA budget was a significantly larger percentage of the federal budget. We hit about 3% at the time, and that was because, quite frankly, the country was in a race with the Soviets to put the first person on the moon. So in terms of what NASA has, they have 58 sites on the continental United States. Those of you in Cleveland are familiar with now it's called Glenn Research Center. Back then it was Lewis Research Center. I am out of the headquarters in Washington, D.C. There's numerous other centers around the country. All have their own specialty, competency, and mission that they need to accomplish. It's a difficult agency to manage and lead overall, simply because the way we were established as 10 semi-independent centers. So the headquarters is not an authoritarian figure. We try to guide the agency in certain directions based on what the president tells us to do. There's also 34 sites outside the continental United States. We've got sites in Madrid, sites in Australia, and those offshore sites are typically used as either emergency landing sites or sites for satellite dishes to ensure 24/7 contact with anything we happen to have in space. So as you know, sometimes the spacecraft we would like to communicate with is on the back side of the planet from where we sit. The signals aren't going to propagate all the way around the planet and go out to the vehicle. We have to have a satellite dish on that side of the planet also. So that's kind of how it works. NASA is the 6th largest federal landholder in the country. We have a lot of real estate. The majority of that is clear zone. As I think you all imagine, that we do a lot of work that is can be quite dangerous. Things can go boom. Rocket engines do blow up on occasion, and so forth. So you have a large clear zone, a large clear area that to make sure that there's nobody nearby in case you have a bad day. So there's roughly 17,000 civil service employees. Civil service means we work directly for the government. My Uncle Sam signs my paycheck. I am a federal employee. On top of that, we have, I think the latest count is about 40,000 contractors who are not civil servants, but they are ultimately paid by the government. The total assets we have, excluding the value of the land, but in terms of our infrastructure, is about 40 billion. So if the country had a real bad day and every NASA installation was wiped out, it would take about $40 billion to replace it, should they choose to replace it. Areas of major technical pursuit, of course, are space exploration. You all heard about that. Space science, the Hubble Space Telescope, the soon to be launched James Webb Space Telescope. That's a very, very fascinating project. Space technology, developing technology to enable long duration deep space missions, aeronautics research, and aeronautics technology. So let me stop and pause. And if you do you have questions or
I was going to ask Gyrgy, all those sites, all those, have you had a chance to go visit?
Well, I visited all the 10 main NASA sites. The map you're seeing shows some of the auxiliary sites. I have not visited all of them. Again, center, so I have to go out there and verify and inspect and so forth. So I do get a chance to go out. There's 2 sites I haven't been to. They're offshore sites. NASA has a facility in Hawaii, which I'd love to go see, but not because I'm interested in the facility, because it's Hawaii. They also have another site in Bermuda that I'd love to go see. And they have a site in Canberra, which is in Australia, which I'd love to go see. But the government has not seen fit to send me to any of those. So be it.
And so last, or I should say 2 months ago, we talked about kind of relocating for the job, which I know you've done. You're a native Clevelander, and now you kind of reside in Washington, D.C., or split time between Cleveland and Washington, D.C. How is that experience for you, and how does that make you feel about your career and whatnot?
I've been at the headquarters for about 15 years. I started at NASA Glenn here in Cleveland. Took a job up at headquarters, and been there since. Of course, for the last year and a half, with the COVID pandemic, I've been teleworking out of Cleveland. So it's a very, very different world now from what it was back then. It's unclear how we will function going into the future. Are we going to go back to the office, or are we going to all telework? Obviously, some jobs are conducive to teleworking. Some jobs are not. For example, my job would be conducive to teleworking from basically anywhere in the world. I got a computer and a phone. That's all I need. I can work from anywhere. Other jobs, for example, if you're testing a rocket engine, you have to be there to do the test. Someone's got to install the engine, push the start button, and so forth. So you'll see a little dichotomy of people, where some people have to go back in the offices, some people do not. Right now, we're doing a lot of studies on what the future of work looks like. And again, this is not particular to NASA. I suspect every business is doing similar studies. Trying to determine how we're going to operate in the future. Don't know what it'll look like. We shall see. We don't know how long the pandemic's going to go on for. We don't know how long we're going to be teleworking for. For example, some of the considerations we look at, and as part of a group that was doing some analyses, is that at the NASA headquarters, there's about 1,000 of us in the building there. We're block off the National Mall, so to give an idea, pretty close to the Capitol building. We were looking at, do we need to have 1,000 people come into that office every day in this current environment? And the answer is clearly no. So you do some assumptions that says, well, with everybody teleworking, let's make an assumption that efficiency is 10% less. Pick a number. If you don't like 10%, pick a number, whatever you Doesn't matter. Well, it does, but it doesn't. For the simple calculation, we'll talk through 10%. So if you have 1,000 people, they're now 10% less efficient. That means we got to hire 10% of 1,000. You got to hire another 100 people. So you look at the salary of those additional people, and then you look at what it takes to maintain and operate that building and headquarters. We're in a leased building. The government pays about $30 million a year for us to be in that building. So the trade-off is 30 million for this leased building versus hiring 100 additional people. I think you can do the math in your head, and it just doesn't add up to keep the building. I suspect the great majority of us will be teleworking from here on out. I'm not a fan of teleworking. I mean, it works. I mean, it has to work, and it does. I do miss the daily office interactions with the people. I do a lot of business sitting down with somebody in a coffee shop and talking through our issues and how we're going to resolve them. So a lot of that is gone. I don't think you can capture that via Zoom or telephone or something. We'll get by. We'll make it work, but I think there'll be a definite change. I may be from an earlier generation where I'm not be able to adequately adjust. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see.
Very good. Gubby, I believe you had a question you wanted to ask.
Yes, in fact, I have two questions now, but very short ones. My first question is on your previous slide. There was an astronaut out in space, and said astronaut is taking a selfie. Who?
Yes.
I'd
Yes.
like to know who this person is in this.
Well, this is one of the non-real pictures. This is not an actual picture of an astronaut.
That would
But
have
it is
been
the
cool.
ultimate selfie.
Yes.
There was one instance, and I've got a better picture of it later that shows an actual photograph of an astronaut who climbed out of his vehicle, and with he had a little bit of a rocket jetpack that he maneuvered around, and he was the one and only astronaut that went out untethered, meaning there was no connection in terms of a lanyard or a rope connecting him to the spacecraft. And when you're in orbit, you're traveling about 18,000 miles per hour. And it doesn't take a whole lot of miscalculations for the astronaut and the vehicle to separate to a great distance. And it'll become very, very problematic. But yeah, you're correct. This is not a real picture, but we anticipate this becoming real at some point.
Right. And then my second question is back to your current map where you're showing all the various centers. So, just looking at the map of the United States, I can't help but notice that a ton of states have been left off, right? I'm in Chicago, and not only Illinois, but all the surrounding states are out. But then, Cleveland, Ohio is in, and I think we can agree that we have the same terrible weather. We also have a great lake. Like why Cleveland? Why Ohio? And then why some of the southern ones, right? California, Texas, Florida.
When NASA was created in 1958, it was a conglomeration of existing national laboratories. The Langley Research Center in Virginia, that first was put together, I think, 1910 or something. It wasn't called Langley at the time, but it existed back then. The facility in Cleveland existed, and it was put under the umbrella of NASA. Let's see, Ames Research Center out in California, that existed. Since then, the Johnson Space Center was a new construction upon the creation of the agency. The Stennis Space Center was new construction. The interesting one is the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. That area was originally built, predates NASA, of course, at the end of World War II, when the Germans lost the war. Various countries went in there, including the United States, and grab some of the more interesting scientific people at the time. There's a gentleman named Werner von Braun, who was the father of the German World War II German rocketry program that the United States grabbed, brought him here to this country, and Dr. von Braun was an avowed Nazi at the time. They brought him here, and then they built this place called Marshall Space Flight Center, and it's middle of nowhere, absolute middle of nowhere at the time, and they housed people like that in there. And so von Braun developed rockets for this country. The Apollo program was his swan song, if you will. And so a lot of these sites, NASA doesn't have sufficient dollars to have sites in every state. Again, there's 10 primary sites and then a handful of auxiliary sites. And each one has their unique area of focus, aeronautics or space or technology or power or whatnot. You do notice very quickly that a lot of the facilities are right on the coast. And there's an interesting story as to why that is. For example, the Ames Research Center on the West Coast in California, Northern California, and the Langley Research Center on the East Coast. Those two facilities, again, predate NASA, were built by the United States government to do aeronautical testing. Hear that, engines and airplane testing for military purposes. And they were put on the coasts far away from each other because back in the 30s or so when they were created, you didn't have things like radar and guided missiles. And the thought was that if we have these two facilities far away from each other, if the enemy came to this country and attacked, they may take out one, but they probably won't get them both. So hence you have the spread there of East Coast, West Coast. A lot of our facilities are on the water because they need to be, simply because we test rocket engines and rocket subsystems. Typically were built out in California. They were tested in either Huntsville, Alabama at the Marshall Space Flight Center or the Stennis Space Center, and you had to get them there. And so they put them on barges and they took them through the Panama Canal and tested them there. And then when they're done testing, they put them on another barge and barged them over to the Kennedy Space Center where they were assembled and launched. Seems like a crazy idea, but this is where you get into politics, where for example, at the time, prominent senators or congressmen could say, all right, well, I'll support the NASA bill if you build this thing in my district. And so you have a lot of that going on also. So there's no one clean, good answer. Most of the facilities have been around since 60s and earlier, and this is what the agency has. And I don't see changes from that. Did that answer your question?
It did, thank you. And it makes sense. I've been to the Johnson Space Center a couple of months ago for the first time. And it's great, right? Most of the buildings are oldish, or at least
Yes.
from the 50s, 60s. But yeah, I liked it. I spent several hours there. It was really great.
Yeah. You correctly pointed out that most of our facilities are pretty dated. If you think about $40 billion of infrastructure that the agency has, and we're spending, let's say, $500 million per year to update, renew it, take 40 billion divided by 500 million, and what's that, 200 years or something like that? To replace all of infrastructure at current budgets would take on the order of 200 years. And I think we all understand the absurdity of that. It's not sustainable. But that's our reality that we deal with. My job primarily focuses on risk management to make sure the money goes to the right place that needs it at the right time, recognizing that we don't have enough money. We're at the mercy of Congress to appropriate money for us. We're at the mercy of the president to provide some cover for us to argue for more dollars for the agency. Some presidents do, some don't. Some Congresses are very generous with their money, some are not. And so that's just dealing in the government world, that's one of the difficulties that we struggle with. So it becomes both technical as well as political, and there's no way around that. Politics is actually the interesting part of it to me.
Do you foresee the NASA becoming a for-profit organization of some kind? I'm thinking of, space tourism, or just overall making money off of private companies, or even private people. Like I'm thinking of tourists in general.
I don't see that happening for a couple of reasons. We work for, although technically we work for the president, we work for the people of the United States. The NASA does work that private industry could not afford to do. We can spend hundreds of billions of dollars to build a rocket and then shoot it off to the moon. Private industry would not have the wherewithal or the resources to gamble that kind of money where the federal government can. So NASA's role is to do the work, more advanced work that private industry cannot take the risk with. And then as NASA develops it and makes it work, to transition that over to the private sector. The recent transition, as the space shuttle program was shut down, that the president, George W. Bush, made a very, very strategic decision. He said, we're going to retire the shuttle. NASA argued this as well. We don't have any way to get people up there anymore. He goes, it's okay. You'll buy it from somebody private, a private entity. That sparked a massive growth in the private sector. Now you got SpaceX, you got Orbital Sciences, you've got Jeff Bezos' company, was drawing a blank on its name. You got a bunch of private folks who NASA buys from. And oh, by the way, a lot of other folks buy from too. Created an industry out there. And the reality is, to get from the surface of the Earth up to low Earth orbit, the altitude of the space station, that there's nothing for us to learn anymore. It's known science and known technology. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's known. So why is the government spending a lot of money to do something that is well known and the private folks can do it? So our job is to transition activities over to the private sector as soon as possible and let them create businesses, employ people, push the boundaries the way they see Elon Musk at SpaceX has done that. He's the guy who developed that reusable vehicle that lands. Shuttle was reusable, but not the same way his is. So he's made a lot of ground, and that's just wonderful. And I'm a firm believer of transitioning as much as we can over to the private sector. Let NASA do the things that are a much higher risk in terms of economics and whatnot, and let the government do that. And then let the money-making activities, if you will, the commercial activities, turn it over to private guys. So I'm thrilled that Elon Musk is doing what he's doing, and Jeff Bezos and those folks are doing what they're doing.
I think we had a question from Boldijad as well as Agi. Boldijad, if you want to ask yours.
There's also one in the chat. Do you want to start with that?
Yep, I can start with that one too. Gyrgy, there was a question in the chat. I have 2 boys in high school who are interested in space exploration. What would be a good starting choice of a major to get a career in at NASA?
Well, it depends on what they want to do at NASA. NASA obviously has a larger number of technical people, science, engineering, math, any one of the technical fields is fine. NASA also employs chefs, for example. We have astronauts up in the space station, and they really don't cook food per se in a zero gravity environment. Their food comes prepackaged. And so, for example, NASA's got a bunch of chefs who work with the individual astronauts who may be up at the time in the station and develop menus for them and make fantastic meals. We have everything from diplomats to engineers to bridge builders, for example. NASA's got 27 bridges in their property. So it's a wide open field. Of course, my personal interest is in the technical areas. So I'm always a fan of the so-called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math areas, but it's not a requirement at all. What you do need, though, I believe there's three things you need to really be involved with an event like NASA, as well as most any other endeavor, not just ours. You need three things. You need motivation. You need to be able to motivate yourself. You shouldn't rely on other people or somebody outside to motivate you. You need to be able to motivate yourself. You need to, and not only do you need to motivate yourself, you also need the ability to motivate others through leadership. So motivation is key. Inspiration, that's where new ideas comes from. You got to be able, you got to be able to have some inspiration inside you to work new things, try different things. And you also need to be able to inspire other people to pursue these kind of endeavors. Finally, I think one of the most significant ones that I think is lost on a lot of people today is perseverance. You need, these things take time. First of all, you got to figure something out, then you got to convince other people that it's a good thing, then you got to get money for it to do it, and then so forth. You need a lot of perseverance. You need a thicker skin to be able to make things happen. Again, you get those three things along with good education, the sky's the limit.
Very cool. You actually stole one of my questions that I was going to ask you later, but I'm glad we covered it. Excuse me. Boldijad, do you want to ask your question?
Sure, real quick. I was just curious how that 0.5% of the US federal budget, like I know you said it was 3% at some point a while ago, but in the more recent years, is that generally the number it's been around, and how do you see it fluctuating in the future?
Fluctuating, yeah, it's been a good question. It's been fluctuating. I think it's been as low as 0.3%. And of course, back in the Apollo days, it was about 3%. What it really depends upon is what the president's vision is. The 3% days were based on President Kennedy when he made his very, very famous speech. We will, before this decade is out, we will land a person on the moon and bring him back safely. And if you listen to that speech, it's a very inspirational speech, and that started the entire Apollo program and also the previous programs there. And it did result in landing a person on the moon, Neil Armstrong, of course, in 1969, and bringing him back. So again, there's a lot of international geopolitical issues involved. You all understand the Cold War with the Soviets at the time, and by God, we were going to beat them. And you throw enough money at it, and you can do those kind of things, and then that's what happened. The reality is that 0.5%, that 0.5%, that is an about good number. You look at the economy of the United States, on all the so-called entitlements that have to be paid, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and down the line, and all the other things that the federal government pays for. NASA is not, it's not an agency that you have to have. You really need to have a Social Security, a DOD, things like that, but you don't have to have a NASA. We're what's called a discretionary agency, and it's at the president's discretion of what we do. So if you throw more money at the agency, all that means is they'll spend more money. Doesn't mean they'll necessarily accomplish more. What it really depends on is what missions this country wants this agency to execute, and then that comes obviously through the president.
Yeah, but even just 0.3, that's like 40% reduction. So it's like very that's more volatile than I would have expected.
Yep.
So that's very interesting.
It's interesting, for example, under the early days in the 60s, a lot of that money went to building rocket Under the Obama era, it was more about employment. So we spent a lot of money employing people, not necessarily having anything real for them to do. Again, we work at the pleasure of the president, and we execute the president's wishes. Again, the Trump administration, that's when the now current Artemis program started to go back to the moon and Mars. Biden administration is more focused on infrastructure and resiliency. So we're spending a little bit less building, fancy rockets and whatnot, and more money fixing up infrastructure. So it's just the dynamic that changes, and the idea is that you try to keep some amount of consistency in there, so you can actually make progress on reaching any one of the missions that we would like to.
Cool, thanks.
I'll show you a pretty picture, one of my favorite pictures. This one right here.
Just one sec. I think we had one more question from Augie.
I'm sorry, I can't see any. I can't see the chat or any hand.
Yep, I was on mute and didn't get a chance to stop you there. Augie, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, actually, it piggybacks on the prior two questions, and maybe it's related to the picture that you put up there. So I was wondering, obviously, you mentioned that the Cold War was giving an incentive for the president to invest more. Do you envision anything similar in the next 10 years that could boost the budget, or not necessarily the budget, as you said, because there might be more to do with less money, but the goals? Do you see anything coming up politically that would be super beneficial for NASA?
Fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking that. It's my favorite topic. What I think you're leading towards is why are we pursuing, as a nation, as a planet, why are we pursuing space exploration? The how much, when, where, and what destination, that's all insignificant to the bigger question of why we are doing it. Am I interpreting that question correctly?
Yes, that would certainly answer it, and I'm really excited to hear the answer.
Okay, I actually have a slide that leads into that, but it's basically a pretty big question, pretty picture saying why are we doing this. But the reasons are time frame dependent. So depending on what time frame you perceive things in, that will be a different answer. And so, for example, if you're an accountant at a Fortune 500 company, your time frame is next quarter's profits. Okay, you think in that quarter timeframes, quarter of a year timeframes. There's a whole lot of other timeframes out there, and so it depends on what. I'll give you all the answers, and the answer, the one that may resonate with any of you, is based on the timeframes you think in. Like, for example, in the early days in the 60s, it was strictly geopolitical. It was about the Cold War. The United States are going to beat the Russians, the Soviets to the moon, and we're going to show our technical superiority of that. Once that happened, it happened in 1969. It didn't take many years after that for the Apollo program to fall apart. I mean, they could stop this. All right, we did that. Now what? And then there really was not a thought. But so the initial purpose for being in space was geopolitical. Since then, it's grown into Earth observing satellites, telecommunication satellites. Right now, we're at the era, the space station era, where we're learning to live in space as humans for extended periods of times. Astronauts stay up in the space station for over a year at a time now, and in a zero-G environment, there's a lot of significant things that come into consideration. And I do have a chart later that talks about the hazards of being in space. Going into the future, we will continue with Earth observing satellites, studying our planet, and so forth. I do envision the day where it will go back to being military, geopolitical. Space is the ultimate high ground, and various people like to shoot down at other people's. And it's a whole lot easier to park your big weapons in space and shoot down. And that's an unfortunate artifact of being in space. So I believe that will happen. It's just a matter of time. Either the US will do it, or the Chinese will do it, or the Russians will do it, or the Koreans will do it, North Koreans will do it. It's going to, I believe it'll happen at some point. So that'll probably be the next several of decades. Further out in time, we are in space because for resource utilization. As you know, humans as a species are very, very crafty at building things, doing things and whatnot. And we are slowly depleting resources on our planet. I'm sure you've all heard about the rare earth metals and whatnot that are getting challenging to find, at least in certain parts of the country. Out in space, resources for all practical purposes are infinite. You want gold? Well, do you want to buy the ton or the metric ton? It's not an issue. You just got to figure out how to go out and get it. But the point is, the resources out there are infinite. So at some point, we'll be in space for resource utilization, asteroid mining, or whatever. Beyond that, we will have to stretch out from our planet for a multitude of reasons. As you know, there's some effort underway as part of the Artemis program, that's a program to return to the moon in 2024, and then the 2030s land people on Mars. That's I don't know if that goal will happen. I don't know. I don't know what the politics and the financial situation will be at the time, but that is the plan. But if you look out even further in time, you recognize that we, as the residents of this planet called Earth, live with a star, our sun. And the star has a life to it, and it'll go through its various phases. Right now, it's at a very stable phase. At some point in the future, it will grow to, it'll enter what's called the red giant phase, where it will physically expand. And the expansion, it will grow large enough to engulf Earth. So obviously, we don't have to worry about it because we'll be long gone long before then. That's obviously way out in the future. But you also have to consider that in the past in Earth history, there have been massive decimations of life on Earth via either some significant climatic events or a meteorite hitting the planet, as evidenced by the end of the dinosaur era. There is a distinct probability, a numerical probability, that this planet will take a hit. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. It could happen tomorrow, it could happen 100 million years from now. We don't know. And as much as we talk about, mapping out where all the near Earth objects are, we're still surprised all the time that one comes swinging by the planet that we didn't know was out there, and thank God it missed us. It's a very real concern. There's another life-ending event that may be in our future, not ours, because we'll be long dead before that happens. That at one point our Earth was oxygen deprived, and due to various geological and climatic events, oxygen became available in our atmosphere, and then of course the growth of the evolution of life such as us, because we depend on oxygen in the atmosphere. There is a scenario out there that that trend will reverse and the oxygen will go away. Again, not in our lifetimes, not in our great grandchildren's lifetimes, but it's out there. And the point of all this, the bottom line is that we are in space. The ultimate reason is for survival of the human species. That is why we are in space. There's a school of thought that says, humans by nature are crazy, and so maybe better if we all went extinct. But it's what it is, and the ultimate reason we are in space is that is survival of the human species.
A little bit less poetic, but do you see a possibility that we'll use space for waste management? we are creating so much waste that it's just hard to store it on Earth at this point. So do you see this as a probably even short-term outcome?
It could be. It could be. Again, depending on the types of waste you're talking about. Let's talk about some of the real nasties, the nuclear waste from all the reactors that are around the world. Right now, they just put them in containers, bury them underground. Eventually, the containers fail, radiation leaks out, and then hence you got a problem. There was a school of thought at one point says, well, let's take these kind of things, put them on a rocket, and launch them to the sun, launch them into the sun. Great disposal. But when they did the calculations on the probabilities of success, probabilities of failure, there is always a probability of a rocket failing, and it has happened, and they are exploding, such as Challenger, the Challenger shuttle that exploded on the way up. And then if you got loaded with all these nuclear wastes and your rocket has a bad day, it becomes a problem. So in the near future, I think that's a long shot, simply because rockets are incredibly expensive. There's nothing cheap about them. And the amount of weight you can take up on any given rocket is relatively small. And so the cost trade-off doesn't make sense right now. That could change over time. I think we'd be better served as a species to figure out how to recycle, be more effective at recycling, use materials that are recyclable and not necessarily disposable. In the near term, I believe that would be more fruitful.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gabi has a question.
Okay.
Yes, it's back to me, I guess. I mean, you talked about humans as a species and just using some of these technologies and tools and everything to explore life on Earth. So my question to you is, do you believe in aliens, and are there aliens out there?
Excellent question. This is very speculative, but I'm a student of mathematics, so I study those. And if you look at probabilities, and of course, a lot of this depends on your beliefs, religious beliefs and whatnot. But statistically, if life was able to start here, statistically, there are a large number of other planets that it should have also started, that are similar, in similar orbits around their sun, similar water, oxygen environments. They've been finding some of those. The real question is, did they exist in time before us, or will they grow up as a species after we are long gone? There's multiple issues here, and quite frankly, in my opinion, this is just my opinion now, this is not a NASA policy or whatnot. My opinion is that there is life out there. The reality is our solar system is in a relatively insignificant part of the Milky Way galaxy. There are literally billions of other galaxies away, out there. If we were an alien, or look at us, we want to find somewhere interesting to go to. So if we had the capability of going across the galaxy into the following galaxies, before you took off in your ship, you'd find an interesting place to go to. The reality is we're in a relatively insignificant, uninteresting place in our galaxy. Hence, if there are aliens out there, and I believe there are, they just had no reason to come by this way. That help?
Yes, and thank you for, it was a loaded question and it was on purpose. So
it's a great question. I like it.
Thank you. I think someone else raised their hand, or maybe I missed it. No, I missed. Okay, no one else has questions.
Okay. Well, this picture you're looking at right now is astronaut Tracy Caldwell on board the International Space Station. This is a few years old right now. She is in a location in the space station called the cupola, which is a little bubble area full of windows. And I had conversations with numerous astronauts, and they all say the same thing, that sitting right where Tracy is right now, looking at the Earth, is the most fascinating thing they do, to watch the Earth go by you underneath. It takes 90 minutes for the space planet. Every 90 minutes, you'll see a sunrise and a sunset, and you will see the planets. You will recognize features of the continents and the countries. You'll see the light pollution from all the cities. You'll see the fires out in California right now. You'll see the big plumes of smoke and whatnot. And it's just endless fascination. And they all have their cameras up there, and they're all snapping pictures away. They're doing real work also, but it's something I always wanted to do. I did apply for the space for the astronaut program on multiple occasions, but never selected. So I would love to go on up there. But anyway, this is a very unique perspective of our Earth. Let me move on to a few other slides here. We'll go back to questions in a minute. Okay, this is kind of where we've been, where we're going. Obviously, it's the planet Earth in the background. That's Space Shuttle Endeavour. On the lower right of the screen, you'll see this rocket-looking things. Does anybody know what that is? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's the first module of the International Space Station that was put up. The space station was built in pieces, parts, like an erector set, a tinker toy set. The first module that went up was a Russian module. And yes?
Is that the Zvezda module?
Yes. And if you look in the payload bay of the shuttle, there's a can-looking item in there. That's the first U.S. component going up there to be mated with the Russian module and become the first parts of the space station. So obviously this picture is several years old. A couple of neat things you notice about this picture is that if you look at the Earth and look at the horizon of the Earth, and you can see that blue haze out there, and that is our atmosphere. And that is what keeps us alive. And when you look at these type of pictures and you see that, and you realize that, there's a certain amount of fragility to our existence on this planet. And within our corner of the universe, we are the only ones. And so you realize the insignificance to some perspective of who we are. And then from that viewpoint, a lot of our international issues we have with other countries, other peoples, become totally insignificant when you realize that this is all we have right now. So, questions? Okay, let me keep moving on. Just pipe up if you have a question. Again, I really don't see the hands being raised. This is the Artemis program.
György,
Yes.
I just want to be conscious of everyone's time here. I know we're
Okay.
at the top of the hour, and we usually do about an hour for these. I know we started a little late, but I don't know if you want to touch on one or two, maybe three or four of your maybe better slides or slides that are maybe more interesting.
Okay, all right. We'll go to
And we
that.
can wrap it up. I know I even asked you just for an hour, so I don't want to
I
stretch
know.
your time too far either.
I apologize. This is an area I'm very passionate about, and I just tend to lose track of time.
No problem at all. I can tell you're very passionate about it, and that's why I actually asked you to speak. So I appreciate the
let me just-
discussion.
Let me just quickly go through some slides and point out some interesting things. This is a photograph from, I believe, Apollo 17, I believe, the last human landing on the moon. And it's pictures like this that caused the conspiracy theory that the moon landing wasn't real, it was staged in a movie studio. And the reason being is that if you look at this picture, you see the moon, of course, the astronaut there, the flag there. The flag is obviously, there's no wind on the moon, bars and wires. But you look at the skyline, the space, you don't see any stars. And it's the lack of stars that never really landed on the moon. But yes, we really did land on the moon. So anyway, that's just a fun artifact. This is the new rocket. It's called SLS, Space Launch System. This is going to use this to go to the moon and onto Mars. One of the biggest rockets ever built. We are assembling it right now. The first of the Artemis missions using this rocket will be launched, I believe, early next year. I think that's current schedule. This is always an interesting topic, astronaut selection and training, how that works. I know this firsthand because I applied multiple times and finally got told I didn't have the right stuff, and so I stopped applying. But astronaut selection occurs back when I was applying every other year. So every other year there'd be a call going out to submit your paperwork for consideration. And after years and years and years of applying and never, always getting the Dear George letter, try again next time. I finally, on one of my trips down to Houston, where the astronauts train, I walked into the astronaut office and had a conversation with them saying, what does it take to get in here? And so they explained it to me. Typically, every other year when the call goes out, they receive over 6,000 applicants. And out of that 6,000, they will invite roughly 100 down to Houston, to the Johnson Space Center, for all the battery of tests, physical, psychological, emotional, and they'll prod and poke you in places you didn't know you had. And out of that 100 or so, they'll select about 10 to 12. So out of 6,000 applicants, you're down to about 10 to 12. So it's a long shot. They look for what your background is. They look for your emotional state, your physical state, your educational state, and so forth. And then it's a difficult process. And I'm happy there's people who do that. Let's see, we'll pass on this one. This is one of my other favorite shots. This is an actual photo from Apollo 8 in 1968. Apollo 8 was the first Apollo vehicle that went to the moon. It didn't land. Apollo 11 was the first that landed. Apollo 8 just circled around a few times. 3 astronauts on board. 2 of them were busily taking pictures of the moon. One of the astronauts looked backward and said, what does the Earth look like from here? So this is the infamous Earthrise photo. It's an actual photo showing the Earth being off planet from far away. And then again, it's these type of photos where you realize that in our part of the universe, we are very, very much alone. Moon is barren. Mars is, for all practical purposes, barren. Every other planet within our solar system is in essence a dead planet. And so we are in what's called the Goldilocks zone, which is the right combination of distance from our star, appropriate atmosphere, appropriate iron core. So we've got a magnetic field around our planet. So it's just kind of a neat thing. And let me go one more here. Here we go. This is a picture taken from Mars by one of the probes there. And that little dot where the Earth and the arrow is, that's what the Earth looks like from Mars. And again, it gets back to how little we really are and how far away these things are. So it's just a unique perspective. And it helps you to get back and think about what is the meaning of all this? Why are we doing this? Not just the space exploration, but you start thinking about the meaning of life and all those kind of things. Of course, I know we're getting way off track from engineering, but it's very interesting. I had a lot of conversation with astronauts, and they would tell their stories, and they all say the same thing. They realize how fragile our planet is, and it wouldn't take much to end our existence. And we need to value what we have here on this planet, because there ain't no place to go to right now but here. There ain't no place like home, and this is it. So let's take care of it. Last slide. This is that infamous shot of the astronaut who is really free floating. He's not taking a selfie. They didn't have selfie cameras back then. This is out of the 60s, actually, and the first time an astronaut went untethered out in space. And he was just out there floating, and he had a little rocket pack, and he was scooting around with that. So on the right, there's various links. If you're interested in things the agency does, Mihai has all these charts. It's got my contact information. If you want to contact me, I'd be happy to talk to you and help you out in any way I can. But at the end of the day, I feel very, very blessed that I was able to follow my passion, follow what I wanted to do, and the so-called living the dream, because this is what I wanted to do since I was a little kid, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to experience it, and hopefully the government will keep me for another couple of years before I'm having to retire. So, any more questions, thoughts?
No, I have a couple as we close out here. So maybe one is, as a NASA engineer or as a NASA employee with quite the tenure, what kept you at NASA, or what kept you interested in being a NASA employee? And maybe one other one is, what are kind of the resources that you turn to stay on top of the latest news, technology, or developments in the engineering field, things that you can maybe employ or leverage through your day-to-day projects and work that you do for NASA?
Well, a couple of semi-loaded questions, although not really. First of all, I'm doing what I've always wanted to do, so it's not work. I go in there because I want to go in there. I do look forward to every day. I do look forward to what the agency does. I follow what the agency is doing. I follow what the other space agencies around the world are doing. I try to keep current on some areas of engineering. Of course, my day-to-day job really doesn't require engineering. I'm more of a I do more of steering people as trying to lead them to ensure that our infrastructure is properly maintained. I do a lot of work writing documents that go to the Congress, basically asking for money for the agency. So in terms of hardcore engineering, that's in my past now. The last real hardcore engineering I did was in the early days when I was doing, I had the wonderful opportunity to work on some advanced rocket engines. So I was the proverbial rocket scientist. We got to build these things, put them on a test stand and fire them up. And every now and then you blow one or two of them up, they explode when things didn't go well. But back then I was doing real engineering work, and obviously we're very, very current on all the latest and greatest technologies and techniques and materials and so forth. Mihai, I lost track of that second part of that question.
The second part was more around, just latest news, technology, and developments in the field. The other part was, what kept you at NASA for such a long time? I know, you look at today's, the people that are going into today's workforce, and I personally know that a lot of my friends have switched companies quite a few times, kind of jump around, look for the next interesting thing or whatever. So it's always great to hear from someone, at least for me. I'm kind of on the same track, but it's great to hear from someone that's been in or at the same company for such a long time, and what really keeps them in that position. What can you maybe offer to the new generation of employees or the next generation of employees, college students today, on what to look for when they're searching for their career, when they're searching for their employer, that sort of thing?
Well, first of all, I think that in the near future, long-term employment, in other words, staying with a single entity for your entire career, like I'm doing, is becoming a rare and rare event. I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's just a fact of life. But what I would suggest to all of you is that what is important is find your passion, find the area that has meaning to you, and then you pursue that with all the vigor you have. You go out there and do it. I found mine. I was very fortunate. I found mine, and I have no interest in working anywhere else. When I retire in a couple of years, I may start my own business at best, but I won't go work for anybody else because I did what I wanted to do. I accomplished most things I wanted to accomplish. Got everything I wanted, probably more than I really deserved, but I can't beat that. Nice thing about an entity like NASA, although it's political and you got to deal with the politics, which I happen to like, there's not a profit motive per se in there. So in other words, we don't sell stuff. We basically ask the American people to support us and through government funding, fund these endeavors. But to some extent, it is altruistic because everything we do, most everything we do, it becomes publicly available knowledge. And so to me, that's a more altruistic reason for doing these than a purely money, earning a lot of money endeavor. I mean, people choose careers for different reasons. I would strongly encourage you to choose your career based on your passions, because then it's not work. It's you're doing what you want to do. It's just not work. If you choose a career because you think you make a lot of money, you'll most probably be very miserable in your career. You may not live long enough to enjoy all the money you'll make. All your heart, all your passions, get educated, and then just go for it.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Gyrgy. Appreciate your time this evening. I don't know, I'll still open it up just for a moment or so if there are any other questions. Sounds like no.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you
much.
for hanging in this whole hour. I truly appreciate talking to fellow Magyarok. And feel free to contact me. Mihai has the charts. It's got my contact information there. Let me know what I can do to help you out. And hopefully in our travels, we can run into each other.
Thank you so much, György.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
the great presentation.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going